This is Pro Football Perspective. I am Nathaniel Bradley. Whether you're at home, work, the gym, in your car, or wherever you are, thanks for taking time out of your day to spend here. Pro Football Perspective is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, and the Podbean app. What's happening? Okay, enough build up. Let's just get to it. We talked about it on our last episode, GOAT quarterbacks. We're going to do it. We're going to do it right. I've got 16 names to put in this list here. We're going to evaluate them across a number of different categories over the coming weeks to try to gain a better perspective on whose career resume is the best. A lot of names you'll be expecting and you've heard them before. Some of them not so much. They might be surprises to you. As far as who's a part of this list, the 16 people I came up with, so in order for a player to even qualify for me to take a look at them, they had to start at least 7 games in 7 seasons. So that eliminates a few current players that one in particular I'm sure a lot of you will be thinking of. So why did I select 7 games and why 7 seasons? So a little bit because 7 seasons is basically twice as long as that fabled, I don't know if it's really ever been verified, 3.5-year average NFL career. I chose 7 games because that's, for half of these guys, that's more than half the season. So it gives you kind of a proper sample size, so to speak. It's not too short, but it's also, if they made it through 7 games, you can kind of establish who they were going to be for that season anyway. Once I decided who was eligible, I picked 16 players based on just common names that come up currently, but also I tried to think of a few of the common names that came up in the past. Okay, so in the 60s, they weren't bringing up Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady as GOATs, okay, obviously. They had different people they were talking about. Now, I didn't include everybody. That would make this a pretty exhaustive list, okay? So I tried to trim it down, pare it down. Hey, it's a little bit arbitrary. This is the part of these evaluations where I used my gut the most. The evaluations themselves are based in fact and statistical analysis, and it's not my opinion. It's just me reading, what comes out and what shakes out of it. For this part, yeah, I used my gut. I just tried to imagine if somebody's sitting in their local watering hole or at a barbershop and they throw out a name as the GOAT, did it have any merit to it? So even if it's not the most popular or the consensus opinion, would there be an argument that could be made there? And if I thought to myself, okay, yeah, I guess you could make that argument, then they were in. So I've got 16 guys here. Like I said, at least 7 games for 7 seasons. If somebody played fewer than 7 games in any given season, I didn't include that particular season in the evaluation. So I tried to do this just a blanket across all the players. Some players, hey, it didn't affect anything. You're still counting every season of their career into this evaluation. Some players, you're going to be missing a couple of seasons here and there. Some of it's because of injury. Some of it might be because of an organizational kind of trend and shift. Some of it might be because of poor performance. I didn't want to try to nitpick back and forth and cherry pick seasons here. So I just said, hey, if they played less than 7 games in the season, I didn't count it. So it's going to be a good sample size. I didn't want it to be, one guy's lighting it up for 2 games and then he blew out his knee. I didn't want to count that season because I thought it might skew things a bit. Same reason why I didn't want to count it if they break their hand 3 games into the season and then they struggle for 3 games and it's like, okay, well, they played 6 games, but were they really a good indicator of who that player was for that season or who that player was overall in their career? So that's how I kind of differentiated and eliminated some games and some seasons, I should say, from consideration. So We came up with 16 names. I struggled to kind of find a decent label to put on this list here. For now, we'll call it the GOAT group. I like it. I'm not in love with it. I'm open to suggestions there. Send something better. I pray. So each episode over the next few weeks here, we're going to take a deep dive into a particular evaluation lens, and I'll do my best to remain kind of laser focused on the metrics being discussed at that particular time. That means when an episode is focused on an individual's production, team success isn't really going to be discussed or factored in during that episode. Likewise, if we're talking about defensive support for these quarterbacks, okay, how did their team's defense perform? I'm not going to talk about the offenses that they're facing. Okay, that's a separate discussion. We're going to really stay focused in on what we're speaking about for each evaluation and for each episode here. That's the goal, at least. I may stray here and there, and like I said, if it suits if it suits my argument at the time, I'm more than happy to contradict myself. So as we begin our GOAT quarterback series, our first category that we're going to evaluate for these players is era adjusted passing stats. Yes, era adjusted. So hang on to your butts here. We're going to go full on nerd alert to kind of explain this, okay? ProFootballReference.com has an excellent formula for determining how quarterback's production compared to his peers at a particular given time. Okay, for example, if you want to know how Drew Brees performed during the 2009 season, they're going to take an average of the 2008, 2009, and 2010 seasons to generate a league average, okay, of all categories across the board, okay? And then they're going to rank Drew Brees' 2009 season comparatively to what the league average was for those 3 years. Okay, so that way you're actually viewing it through a lens of not how does he compare to John Elway's 1987 season. You're comparing it to how does he compare to the league average during that time. So that's what they do. ProFootballReference.com. They have the formula there. It's pretty straightforward. You can check it out on their website. 9 categories are a part of this adjusted passing stats. I'll call them era adjusted passing stats. It's synonymous, interchangeable here. The 9 categories are as follows. They have yards per attempt. They have net yards per attempt. So that takes into account yards lost from sacks. Okay. Adjusted yards per attempt. This essentially gives greater weight to touchdown passes and interceptions. Okay, so in other words, they're not weighting a 10-yard touchdown pass as just 10 yards. They're giving it weight. Okay, same with an interception. In terms of adjusted yards per attempt, they're kind of giving they assign values to touchdowns and interceptions so that it gives it a weighted score. There's a book about it, The Hidden Game of Football. They've got an explanation for that and why they arrived at the figures they did to compute that formula. Adjusted net yards per attempt. So again, they're weighting touchdown passes and interceptions, and then they're also factoring in yards lost from sacks. The last 5 categories they have are pretty common that you've heard of before. Completion percentage, touchdown percentage, interception percentage, sack percentage, and quarterback rating. So those are the 9 categories that are included in these era adjusted stats. Again, you can view these on profootballreference.com. What they do with those categories, like I mentioned, they take a league average over a 3-year period around the season that you're looking at. So these are seasonal averages, and then they're compared against the league average over the course of 3 seasons. All of the stats, they grade out, and they kind of put them into their formula and do their beep, beep, boop, boop with their calculator. Okay, 100 is league average. For every single category, for every single stat, 100 is league average. So that includes sack percentage. interception percentage, touchdown percentage. Okay, if somebody grades out with a touchdown percentage score of 102, obviously they're not throwing a touchdown 102% of the time. What it means is that they're 2% better than the league average. Okay? Basically, how do you figure out, hey, what's good, what's bad, what's great? So typically for these categories and for in terms of scoring, if you're scoring above 140, that's like an all-time season. Okay, there's very few people that have ever scored above 140 in in each individual category, let alone overall. Okay, if you're scoring between 130 and 140, that's typically an elite season that's going to lead the league. Okay, in that given season. If you score between 120 and 130, that's a great season. 110 to 120 is good. Okay, 105 to 110, that's solid. 100 to 105, that's just above average. Obviously, like I mentioned, 100 is the average. Okay, so anything that scores below 100 is below average. So if you've got somebody that scores an 83 in completion percentage, that does not mean they have a completion percentage of 83%. That means they're actually 17% below the league average. So they're a very inaccurate passer. Okay, the same way, if they score 109 on yards per attempt, they're not averaging 109 yards per attempt of a pass. It means that they're averaging 9% better than the league average. Okay. The reason I love this particular group of stats so much is that it really does neutralize eras for the most part. You can take a quarterback from the 50s and 60s, compare him to his peers, come up with a score, and then you can take a quarterback from the 80s or 90s, take a score from what they get out of this compared to their peers, and then you've got a good idea of, okay, how did this guy stack up within his era, and it's neutralized now. Okay, you don't have the inflated statistical stats that go along with just time. As we progressed through, decade after decade and into the 21st century, a lot of these numbers are becoming so astronomically high that it's really hard to compare somebody from an era in the past. But this group of statistics makes that possible, and that's why I like it so much. Like I mentioned, we're going to look at quarterbacks that had 7 or more starts, for 7 or more seasons. What we're going to do is we're going to take their scores for each of these categories. We'll give them, an overall grade for each individual season that they played. We're also going to give them an overall grade for each category for their career. Okay, so you can see who was a fantastic, quarterback at avoiding sacks throughout their career. Likewise, who had a great yards per attempt compared to their peers throughout their career. And then, of course, we're also going to assign kind of an order or a rank to these quarterbacks. That rank is going to be dictated by their overall score for their entire career. And that score is going to take into account all 9 categories across every qualifying season that we graded out here. And so that's going to give us, like I said, it's going to give us a ranking that I'm sure is going to drive some people crazy. This is just this episode and this particular evaluation. All I'm looking at is individual production. It doesn't factor in team success. It doesn't factor in how great their defense was, how bad the offensive competition may have been. It doesn't factor in wins and losses. Okay? All this is just how well they performed on an individual production basis compared to their peers. Okay? So, disclaimer. I'm going to put that out there, okay? That's all this is. This is the best individual production compared to his peers of all time. Another disclaimer here. I mentioned a minute ago kind of some terms that are going to be associated with where somebody scores. Okay, so, below 100 is a below average season. 110 to 120 is a good season. So I'm going to be using those terms, because I can't be just blasting numbers for 25, 30 minutes here, I've got to find a way to make it a little more palatable for the ear. It's gonna sound a little harsh, is what I'm saying. I'm gonna be talking about some of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game, and I'm gonna say, oh, they had 2 good seasons. So keep in mind that's just a term for these evaluations here. It's not meant to be a slight. It does sound harsh in a vacuum, considering, all of these guys are absolute legends. But for this podcast, we've got enough numbers and percentages and jargon. So again, I'm just trying to soften it a little bit for everyone listening so they're not hearing numbers the whole time. So the evaluation itself, these group of stats, it's a good but not perfect way of leveling the playing field. We will dive into that deeper at the end of this series, okay, so that you can, pick it apart, and we'll talk about, where it comes up short. It doesn't take into account, situational stats. Like I said, it doesn't take into account defense, team success, things like that. It's limited, okay? It's just individual production. I get that. We'll talk about the flaws and all of that at the conclusion here. But without further ado, it is time to finally begin our GOAT quarterback series with era-adjusted stats. Coming in at number 16, the Blonde Bomber, Terry Bradshaw. So Terry Bradshaw was never really heralded for filling up the stat sheet, so I managed my expectations prior to looking at how he stacks up with this particular metric, being that its entire focus is individual production here. If you want to know when did Bradshaw peak on an individual production basis, it was 1978. 1978, he averaged across these 9 categories 122, which, if you remember from the explanation, that's 22% better individual production than the league average. So not a bad season there. As far as Bradshaw's career as a whole, kind of a mixed bag. Okay, he had his down years in terms of individual production, and like I said, the 78 season was his peak. So in 1970, his rookie year, 73 was his overall score. 71, he wound up with a 94 overall score. 1972, a 97 overall score. 1973, he had an 89 overall score. 1974, his first Super Bowl, okay, he had still a below average individual production score here, overall of 90, okay. 1975, good season for him, 112. 1976, he was right around average, just under at 99. 1977, 110 score. 1978, like we said, that's when he peaked, score of 122 for the season. 1979, 113 score. 1980, 106. 1981, 115. Okay, 82, he was right at 107. Okay, so that's kind of how he shakes out season to season. All right, we're looking at in total 6 below average seasons, 2 solid seasons, 4 good seasons, and 1 great season. In terms of each individual category across his career, okay, so where did he excel and where did he kind of falter in terms of his individual production? Yards per attempt, he had a career average 105. Okay, now that's 15th if you were ranking him among all the other quarterbacks that we evaluated here. So it seems like, oh, that's low. Bear in mind, I mean, he's basically for 13 years, he averaged 5% better than the league average. Anytime you're averaging above league average, that's good. And then if you can stack multiple seasons like that, that's a ton of value you're adding to your team. So just keep that in mind. Net yards per attempt. So again, taking sack yards into the equation here. He was 105 for his career. Okay, that's 12th within the GOAT group. Adjusted yards per attempt, 104. That's 16th within the GOAT group. Adjusted net yards per attempt, 103. That's 12th. Completion percentage, 93. Okay, that's last in the GOAT group. That's actually a little bit below average for his career in terms of comparing him to his peers. touchdown percentage, 113. That's solid. That's ninth within the GOAT group. His interception percentage, 95, was his score there, and that's last in the GOAT group. Sack percentage, he got a 102 score, so he's just slightly above average compared to his peers throughout his career there. And that's 10th, again, within the GOAT group. Quarterback rating, also at 102 for his career. So slightly above average quarterback rating throughout his career. That was actually last within the GOAT group. So Bradshaw's scores here are near the bottom of the group. His overall score for his career, so every season, every category, averaged. That comes out to 102.5. So you might look at that and say, oh, slightly above average quarterback. Well, I mean, there's a little more to it than that. Keep in mind, we're splitting hairs in terms of comparing his production to the other 15, within the GOAT group also. Needless to say, I think his career turned out all right. Nothing to hang your head about with Terry Bradshaw's career there. Now, coming in at number 15 on our list here, the Duke of Denver. So John Elway, in my opinion at least, is the most talented quarterback to ever play the game. Arm talent, generational talent, a couple of terms that we hear thrown around a lot, even though a generation is, 20 to 30 years. We seem to hear generational talent every year now. Another topic for another day, I guess there. Frustrating, for me at least. So those terms, arm talent, generational talent, Elway predates those. Spoiler alert, he predates them because they came from him. I mean, the guy was just out of this world athletic for the quarterback position in terms of what he could do running the ball, throwing the ball, the way he saw the field. His mobility was just amazing. The guy was a human highlight reel before such a thing existed. So sorry to all you Rodgers and Mahomes fans out there, but anything that they do now that gets the highlights and the viral treatment and everybody is talking about how eye-popping it is, Elway was doing that in the 80s and 90s for that matter. And he was doing it prior to all the rule changes that have encapsulated the quarterbacks in safety. So it's just, he's one of my favorites of all time for a number of reasons, but among those was just his flat out ability. When it comes to Elway's individual, production, when it comes to these era adjusted metrics here, interesting career arc here. He peaked in his final season. Pretty rare. But yeah, his best overall season was 1998, and his individual production score was a 117 overall, 17% better than his peers that year. The rest of his career, kind of like hit or miss. I mean, really in 1983, that was his lowest individual output. He scored an 81 overall score that season. 1984, he was at a 102 there. 1985, he was at a 96. 1986, he was at 105. 1987, he scored 114. Okay, that was his best season of the 80s there. 1988, he was just below league average with a 97 overall score. 1989, he was at 99, so essentially league average then. Same in 1990, he was at a 100 overall score, so essentially league average. 1991, same story there, right at 99. 1992, a little bit of a dip. This was his lowest score of the 90s. He scored an 89 overall production that season. 1993, back up to 114. Good season. 1994, he was at a 104 overall score. 95, a 112. 96, a 112. And then 1997, a 110 overall score. And then, like I said, 1998, his peak season, he had a 117 overall score. And all that adds up to is 6 below average seasons, 3 above average seasons, 1 solid season, and 6 good seasons. If you're looking at Elway's performance within each category for his career, it goes as follows here. 104 was his score for yards per attempt, and that's actually last in the GOAT group, still above league average for his career. Net yards per attempt, so taking sacks into account here, again 104, and that's 13th within this GOAT group here. Adjusted yards per attempt, he scored at 105, and that's 15th in the GOAT group. Adjusted net yards per attempt, he scored a 105, and that's 11th in the GOAT group. So completion percentage here, he's almost dead on league average throughout his career at 100.06. So that's 15th in the GOAT group. His touchdown percentage just above league average for his career at 101, and that was 15th in this GOAT group here. Interception percentage, he was at 105 for his career, and that's, again, 12th in the GOAT group. Sack percentage, just above league average throughout his career at 102. That's 9th in the GOAT group. Quarterback rating, he's at 103.94. And that's a pretty common theme for Elway, just slightly above league average in terms of his individual production. And that was 15th in the GOAT group for quarterback rating. And Elway's overall score across all categories and all seasons for his career average here would bring him to a 103.74 individual production. So that's his era adjusted score. And it's about kind of, what you would expect if you look at each individual category or each individual season. So Elway's scores here are probably going to disappoint a lot of his fans. But it's not really a knock. Like any of these metrics, one group of stats can't really capture the eye test. It can't capture intangibles. It can't capture his mobility. That's something we're going to discuss a lot going forward here with these quarterback scores and this particular metric. It doesn't really encapsulate mobility, and Elway had it for sure. Really, if a metric shows you as 15th best of all time, you're all right in my book. All right, moving on to number 14 on our list. Before Rodgers, before Favre, there was Bart Starr. Extremely efficient with the football throughout his career. He put the Packers over the hump over and over again. He played mistake-free football. He came up big in the big moments. He was a clutch quarterback, a leader of men. Whatever superlative you want to use to describe him, you were dead on with it. So in terms of his individual production compared to his peers throughout his career, he had some extremely high marks here. So he peaked in the 1968 season with 136 score. That's elite. Okay, so that's the highest score we've seen yet on this list. He also had a score in 1966 that was right at 130 and a half. So another elite season, to use that term there. For the rest of his career here, if we go through season by season, 1957, he had a 104 score. 1958, 76. That was his worst individual production season. 1960, he was at 104. 1961, he was at 109. 1962, he was at 120. Okay. 1963 at 108. 1964, he was at 121. 1965 at 115. 66, he had that score, that elite level score at 130. 1967, just above average, it dipped down to 101. 68 was his peak. And then 1969, he was at 110. 1970, he was at 94.89. So a little bit below league average there. All told, he's sitting with among qualifying seasons here. Okay, so bear that in mind. This is among qualifying seasons. You notice I left out 1959. He had 2 below average seasons, 3 above average seasons, 2 solid seasons, 2 good seasons, 2 great seasons, and 2 elite seasons. So a little bit of everything there from Starr throughout his career. As far as how he kind of performed within each individual category, yards per attempt 111 score for his career. That's great. He's looking at 11th in the GOAT group though. Compared to his peers, that's a good season each and every year. Net yards per attempt, he was below the league average at 93, and that's 14th among the GOAT group. Adjusted yards per attempt, he was at 111. Solid score again, but within the GOAT group, that was 13th. Adjusted net yards per attempt, slightly below league average at 99, and that's 14th in the GOAT group. His completion percentage, 121. Okay, throughout his career, his completion percentage was great. Okay, especially compared to league average. I mean, he's 6th among the GOAT group there. His touchdown percentage actually slightly below league average throughout his career, 97. That's last in the GOAT group. His interception percentage, 112 for his career, kind of right mid-pack in the GOAT group at 8th. His sack percentage was at 78.5, way below the average of the league throughout his career, and also 14th in the GOAT group. His quarterback rating was 113 for his career in terms of his score there compared to league average, so 13% better, and that was 12th among the GOAT group. His overall score, if you factor in every category, every season, and average it out there, his individual production score for his career was 104.31, which is, I mean, that's gonna get you a lot of W's out there. His individual production doesn't necessarily like jump off the stat sheet, but I really wouldn't have expected it to. Like Bradshaw, like Elway, we're comparing him to a bunch of all-timers in the GOAT group, so we're being really nitpicky when we talk about where he ranks compared to the others. He still can easily be shown as one of the most accurate and mistake-free passers of all time. Next up on our list within the GOAT group here, number 13, the Gunslinger. So from one Packer great to another, Brett Favre here. Favre held most of the major counting stat records for quarterbacks when he retired, along with some of the most eye-popping plays on a weekly basis. I'm not sure any other player on this list really exuded the whole kid just having fun playing the game vibe more than Favre did. His style of play just kept you on the edge of your seat, whether you're rooting for him or against him. Season to season, Favre wasn't quite as Jekyll and Hyde as some of his individual games might have made you think. His worst individual production score came out of his final year when he was with the Vikings, an individual production score of 90.22, so a little bit below league average in his final season. Anybody watching could have seen that. His best individual production compared to his peers came in the 1995 season with a score of 123. When you go through his career, his first season with Atlanta did not qualify here. So we're looking 1992, he scored 106. 93, he had a 95 overall score there. And so that was a little bit below league average. 1994, a 110 score. 95, as we said, a 123 score. 1996, he was at 116. 1997, he was at 116. 1998, 110 overall score. 1999, just slightly below league average, 99 score there. And 2000, just slightly above league average at 101. 2001 ticked back up at 119 overall score there. 2002, he had a 107 overall score. 2003, he had a 109 overall score. 2004, up to 116 overall score. 2005 and 2006, he had overall scores of 92 and 96, respectively, there. 2007 was a bounce-back season, though, at a 117 overall score. And then 2008, he wound up with a 97 overall score, a little bit below league average. 2009, he went right back up to a 120 overall score. And then, like I said, his final season, 2010, a 90 overall score, which was his lowest output compared to his peers throughout his career. When you look at his season-by-season progressions here, Favre had 6 below-average production seasons, 1 above average, 3 solid seasons, 7 good seasons, and 2 great seasons. As far as his, production from one category to another throughout his career. You look at yards per attempt, and he had a 105 score there, which is 14th in the GOAT group. His net yards per attempt score was 108. His adjusted yards per attempt score was 105. His adjusted net yards per attempt score was 108. And his completion percentage score for his career was 111. His touchdown percentage score was actually 112, almost 113, and that was actually one of his best categories. He scored 7th there amongst the GOAT group. His interception percentage score of 97.84, so a little bit below league average. That's no surprise for anybody that watched him play. That was 15th amongst the GOAT group. Sack percentage, he was 110, which is another strong score, and that puts him 7th in the GOAT group. His quarterback rating score, 109 for his career, well above the league average, and that puts him 14th in the GOAT group in that particular category. His overall score across all categories and all seasons is 107.74. So outstanding production throughout his career. His scores are actually not surprising. His worst category, interception percentage. His best category, touchdown percentage. Kind of the dichotomy you would come to expect, and probably, really enjoy when you watched him. Really one of the most entertaining quarterbacks of all time to just watch every Sunday, and it was great to kind of take a look at some of these numbers and see how they stacked up. And that brings us to the final quarterback we're going to look at on this episode. Number 12 on our list of GOAT group quarterbacks, Johnny U. Johnny Unitas, he model of consistency, clutch play, you name it. His throwing motion and playing style were pioneering in many ways and still modeled after to this day. He, the prototypical quarterback. They could write textbooks and draw diagrams, and they used Johnny Unitas to do so. So in terms of his individual production compared to his peers, how that stacks up against the rest of the GOAT group, let's get after it. So Unitas had 14 seasons qualify for evaluation out of his 18-year career. His final 3 seasons were thrown out due to him only starting a total of 14 games, and his 68 season was not counted due to his preseason injury that kept him from starting any games. His 1957 season was his best season in terms of individual production. He scored a 125.5 that season. As far as the rest of his career, that in qualifying seasons at least, we're looking at 1956, he had a 111 score. 57, he had a 125 score. Like I said there, that was his individual production peak. 1958, he scored a 119 overall. 1959, he had a 117 overall score. 1960, he had a 105 overall score. 1961 was his worst production from an individual standpoint. He had a 97 overall score. That's his only season below league average. 1962, he had a 104 overall score. 1963, a 117 score. 1964, a 123 score. And 1965, a 122 score. So 2 back-to-back great seasons there. 1996, a 105 overall score. 1967, a 114 overall score. In 1969, a 103 overall score. In 1970, a 102 overall score. So those were just the qualifying seasons. Like I said, 18-year career, 14 seasons qualified for evaluation here. As far as those qualifying seasons, he had 1 below average, 3 above average, 2 solid, 5 good seasons, and 3 great seasons. When it comes to per category with Unitas, yards per attempt, we're looking at a 112 overall score, so well above league average. That's 8th within the GOAT group. Net yards per attempt, he was at 113 for his career in terms of his score, and that's also 8th within the GOAT group. Adjusted yards per attempt at 113, also another good score here. Not quite as high within the GOAT group, though. It ranks 10th. Adjusted net yards per attempt, 103 score for his career. That's just a little bit above league average. That's 13th within the GOAT group. His completion percentage score for his career was 112. That's 10th in the GOAT group. His touchdown percentage score was 107, which is actually tied for Unitas's lowest ranking category amongst the GOAT group. That's 13th in the GOAT group there. His interception percentage score was 109, ninth in the GOAT group. His sack percentage score is excellent here. It's a 118 score there, and that's good for third best in the GOAT group. Quarterback rating score, 114. That's way above average around the league for his day, and that's 11th in the GOAT group. As far as his overall score, all seasons that qualified along all categories, his overall score is a 111.71 for his career there. So, I mean, Unitas is certainly an all-timer and held most of the major marks upon retirement. His scores show him to be a considerable upgrade over the average individual production during his era. And, you know, what's so much more than the numbers on a spreadsheet, I think anyone listening to the show knows, is that Unitas is the quarterback that all other quarterbacks strive to be after he retired. So there's something to be said about just the type of player and leader that he was. So there you have it. You know, that's what I've got. That's the first 5 members of our GOAT group. We're looking at Bradshaw, Elway, Starr, Favre, and Unitas. So, you know, pretty good company to keep there. As we go through the painful and often mistaken for being disrespectful task of revealing these rankings, I feel like it's important to just remind everyone and reiterate that this is just one metric. There will be more. And even with the confines of this metric, for a player to have a career average that puts him above the league average is really indicative of greatness in and of itself, because that sustained level of play is really going to contribute to team success. You know, we've talked about this before, so that's something that I think should also be kept in mind. Side note here, I guess if you want to be one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, you should either be named John or play for the Packers. So far, they've got good odds there. Thanks again for joining Pro Football Perspective. Our next episode will continue this series, so look for that coming soon. Again, Pro Football Perspective is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, and the Podbean app. I am Nathaniel Bradley. Deuces.